Hey, thanks for checking out AD Film Study on Higher Ed Athletics. This video, I'm going to break down the recent press conferences at Syracuse, Oklahoma, Charlotte, and New Mexico. If you're more of a written person that you want to read or you want to reference this later, in the show notes, you'll see an article that I put on higheredathletics.com. And if you go to higheredathletics.com, enter your email, this would have actually been delivered directly to your email as a post, just the written. And then you can always find this back on higheredathletics.com under AD Insights. I'll later add the video to the article. So the idea of AD Film Study is really just me watching a bunch of press conferences when we get maybe 3 or 4, break them down in a way that I think can help future ADs or current ADs looking for another job, and you know you're probably going to have to do a speech like this again. It's not just to understand like the words that these athletic directors chose, but it's about the themes, and it's also about understanding the different settings of these press conferences. There's some different ones. And so I broke down the Syracuse, the Oklahoma, Charlotte, and New Mexico. All are somewhat recent. I watched that these are all very different. And so how are they different? Well, think about it. Each situation. Blair was the G6 sitting athletic director that is now joining the P4. Most Syracuse fans expected it to be someone with ties to the university. So Blair found himself really having to kind of introduce himself to the fan base whenever everybody else in the industry knows exactly who he is and that he's one of the best athletic directors. He had to really do an introduction of himself. Roger Denny was a surprise hire at Oklahoma coming from Illinois. Everyone seemed to think, based on using the outside search term of an former NFL executive, and just the length of time of the search, that they were either going to go industry outsider or at least hire a sitting AD. They didn't do either. Kevin White was the Power 4 deputy from Clemson, likely seen as an aspirational school for Charlotte when you look at college athletics, and had more of a traditional pathway to the AD chair. Then Ryan Berryman, he was the interim that everyone seemed to know would be the permanent AD despite his young age. Now, let me just kind of tell you how this is going to work. I'm just going to mostly read my notes from the post and put them here on video and audio for you all to watch or listen. And I'll hit on some of the things. I won't hit on every detail because, this is probably the longest post I've written, and this would be a very long video, but I want to go through each of them, and then I'm going to kind of end it with some final observations and some reminders and final thoughts. And I am trained as a qualitative researcher. I look at observational research, I look at body language, I look at settings of the places. Obviously, it's harder to do when you're not in the room, but all of these were recorded on YouTube. I was able to watch all of them. Most of them I watched twice. When I'm trying to get quotes, I'm going back and I'm really watching what each athletic director is doing, their body language. I'm also looking at the university leadership and how they construct it, and then just how the setting, where is this taking place? And so this post, if you end up reading it and then how I'm kind of talking through it, it's written in bullet pointed form. That's how I take notes. It was the easiest way for me to do it. The link to each press conference video is actually right under the name. And so I'm going to start with Bryan Blair. The press conference was held in what appeared to be the concourse of the Dome. Search committee chair opened up with remarks for about 5 minutes before introducing the chancellor-elect, who spoke for about 10 minutes before then welcoming Bryan Blair to the stage for a picture with a custom Syracuse football jersey. We see this at a lot of places. Now, the opening message by Blair was energetic, good morning, how you doing? That type of thing, that if anyone knows Bryan, that comes off, kind of funny and personable. He actually started with a funny message about how his wife told him to just be himself, not try to be smart or funny. And then Blair started out with a handful of thank you messages to the leadership at Syracuse, his team at Toledo, and then the countless mentors. Chose not to name them all. He did single out a couple of people, but he knew that list would be too hard. So he singled out his parents, and he kind of became emotional at this part, speaking about his mom, middle school principal, and his dad, an entrepreneur, different businesses, and how they taught him about hard work. And that really kind of showed the personal side, I think, early on in this speech. He then showed appreciation for his 2 young children, made a joke about, we're trying to keep things together. They've been on late flights, and just another way, I think, to tie in the personal side of Bryan Blair as he's welcoming him and his family to Syracuse. And then he mentioned a line from his wife that she said, "Go into that interview and show them why Bryan Blair should be the next athletic director at Syracuse." Another great line, I think, to just show that family connection and that belief of a spouse. He then went into his 5 core values. I won't go into all the details, but just so you know what they were, if you're thinking of some: family, passion, integrity, curiosity, and servanthood, and tied each into the position ahead of him at Syracuse. He then explained why Syracuse for him. Why did he answer that call to go back to or to another kind of school and a job that needs rebuilt? And he kept going back to like the history, that he was a history major in college, and the constant brand of the Block S, and wanted to harness that and, quote, "wake this sleeping beast and take control of our destiny and make sure the world knows that Syracuse is one of the top 10 brands in all of college athletics and we're here to stay," end quote. And then he laid out that vision starting with winning. And he mentioned how Syracuse has to modernize the enterprise and not be stuck in what was, and no more, quote, blending and morphing, and instead look at the model for 2026. That includes attacking revenue generation and NIL. He said, quote, "This modernization is something we have to do to survive and thrive." So he starts with personal, and then he's starting to get into vision. And he's seen as a builder in college athletics. He's seen as innovative. Something Syracuse, what I had concern with was if they really did go with someone just because they had Syracuse ties, were they going to be able to were they going to be left behind? And I think he is really trying to use this as introductory, and then also, hey, here's who I am, but here's where we're going as a team. And he mentioned this quote. So this goes to like having like a line or a quip that you can kind of go to and reference, is "weaponize the dome." That was his quote, and that caught attention. Thinks it's incredibly unique how they have one venue for football and basketball, and how they can think outside the box with a dome that is unlike anything in the country, quote. Blair made a joke at the end saying the packed house for the press conference made him think Syracuse must be announcing a men's basketball head coach today or something. Another, kind of applause or laugh from the crowd. This was obviously before he announced that they were bringing in their former alum, the Siena head coach, to be their men's basketball coach. So this was something that he didn't address directly in his actual press conference remarks, but he added that little liner in there at the end. And I think that was just another way to just kind of casually mention it and kind of make fun of a very stressful situation, that his first task was obviously to hire a men's basketball coach. Blair mentioned that he had a staff meeting to talk about transition and make sure they did not have anxiety about this, and instead focus the conversation on teamwork for Syracuse and to get aligned around that vision, mission, and direction. So I noticed that his speech lasted 16 minutes. So if you're watching the video, it started at 29 minutes. They had some dead time, I think, in the video too before they started, and it ended at 45 minutes of the broadcast. What I thought was interesting, I linked it in here. He did a 15-minute interview produced by Syracuse Athletics that I highly encourage you to watch. I'm not going to talk about everything in here because that's not the point of the interview or this video. The videos that I'm looking at are the press conferences, but I did have one quote in here that I think was awesome. This was kind of on theme to what he talked about in his press conference, but not as in depth. And it says, quote, "I want to challenge us all the time to have a growth mindset and think differently. What should we be doing differently? How should we think about getting better in a lot of different spaces? The reality is, when I got hired at Toledo, I was the youngest AD in the country. I've only experienced one way as being an AD, and that's in this era. And if I sit around and complain about wanting to go back to the good old days, well, I've never been an AD in the good old days. This is the good old days for me. And in our time at Toledo, I think we were best in this modern era, and the records show that. So the goal is to do the same thing for Syracuse and, frankly, be the most modern, forward-thinking department in the country," end quote. I wish that would have been in the press conference because it was an awesome quote, and that's just part of it. So you can go watch that. So my analysis of Bryan was he handled this press conference perfectly. He walked into a situation where almost everyone in the college athletics industry knew him as one of the best ADs in the country. But when his name was announced, I'm pretty sure everyone with close ties to Syracuse were confused, surprised, and curious, maybe all three, about who Bryan Blair from Toledo was. They found out in that press conference, and Blair spoke confidently and strategically, including the importance of modernizing the athletic department, leveraging Syracuse academic prowess. He intentionally mentioned Syracuse schools by official name, and that was really helpful. I mean, it even popped up on my LinkedIn feed in the days since and that just kind of helped with his reach of the faculty and how he was looking forward to opportunity to weaponize the dome. I think that was a very good quote of the speech. And I think this demonstrated a fresh approach to what Syracuse fans had probably seen in the last couple of hires and got them excited about the possibilities of the Bryan Blair era. But what I think was also interesting about his speech was his ability to connect in a personable way by showing his personality throughout the speech, including his joking commentary sprinkled throughout that speech. So if you watch it, there's a lot there. But I really think he got off to just his room, he had to do something different than maybe some of these other ADs had to do. So before I get to my next one, I want to tell you about Higher Ed Athletics road trip. So I've done these in the past, but this one, I'm trying to build the biggest HEO road trip I can possibly do in the month of May. And so ideally, that would either be me driving from Indy all the way down to the south tip of Florida and then back a different direction, trying to hit as many schools as I can in like a 1 to 2 week road trip. Or it's Indy to maybe hit the Texas schools, come back more in the Midwest, the South and the Midwest. So I would visit, do a lot of interviews, get a lot of footage of campuses, and just do some cool things. But if you are curious about HEA road trip and you like the type of content I'm doing and you want to see me at your school or meet for coffee privately, learn from some of the things I've learned and talk with me, maybe consider donating $5, $10, $20 to the HEA road trip. That will be a Stripe link in the show notes of this episode. Thank you for supporting Higher Ed Athletics in that way. So Roger Denny, Oklahoma. This was another one that I think found some people off guard. This press conference was held in a formal setting with the university's official seal above the podium and stage, along with the crimson curtain behind the speakers. This one was a little more unique. He had a lot of time to wait before he gave his speech. The university president spoke for 18 minutes to open the press conference, mostly used that to thank Joe Castiglione, and then highlighted the process and the conversations he had with Roger Denny. The president then introduced the Board of Regents chair, who spoke for 5 minutes, mostly about Joe Castiglione, before giving thoughts again on Roger Denny. The president then spoke 3 more minutes in introducing the search committee chair, an alumnus in Randall Stevenson, who spoke for about 6 minutes about the process and the months they spent creating the job description and the process with Jake Rosenberg, who helped lead the search. So Stevenson also gave a shout out to Illinois AD Josh Whitman, which I thought was great. Josh was in attendance, according to him, and talked about for having the brilliance to hire Denny as a deputy at Illinois from private law practice. The president then came back and introduced Denny. So after 35 minutes, Roger Denny was welcomed to the stage and spoke for about 12 minutes in its opening comments. Then after this, they went into a setting where they all sat at a table and they did a media conference with a lot of questions. So Denny stepped to the podium, quickly made a joke that I liked about whether it could be harder to follow the 3 speakers ahead of him just now or following Joe Castiglione as the next AD, which brought laughs. Once again, similar to Blair, kind of getting off on a warming the crowd with a joke type of thing about the situation or just saying a hello. And then it got really serious. So this was the first quote, really. There is only one Oklahoma. That got a lot of applause. And as he continued, the quote, "This place is special and it's unique, and I want to be clear, that word often gets misused. I mean that in the absolute definitional sense. There's one of these. There's one Oklahoma. So I am honored to have this opportunity to lead this program." That was his theme, okay? One Oklahoma. And then dynasties. That's kind of the whole point of his opening monologue, you could say. Denny then went into a thank you message to university leadership, the search committee, and Jake Rosenberg, who led the search. He had mentioned that the search that Jake ran with TAG, the athlete group, was unlike anything he's ever seen in executive search. He then thanked Joe Castiglione, talked about the challenge of taking the torture him and building on that success, but that he was ready for that challenge. This was hard to do. Someone has to come in here and follow Joe Castiglione, and that was just such a good way, I think, of a gentle nod of that. Denny stayed on this theme of there only being one Oklahoma, and went into a list of several individual and team accolades. That really was obviously some back research on that. That transitioned into talking about the excellence university-wide, not just in athletics, how that Sooner magic comes from the excellence expectation. So one Oklahoma, and then excellence expectation was really the second theme. The thank you message transitioned into talking about the importance of a great college education for student athletes, but quickly reminded everyone that winning matters too. He shifted back into the talking point of how championships are the expectation in each program. One comment that I thought was interesting, he said specifically to sports like softball and Olympic sports, widening the gap between us and the field, and then getting Coach Venerables in football the 8th national championship for Oklahoma. What I thought was interesting, Roger then told a personal story to introduce himself. Quote, "We're not here to play small. 5 years ago, I made the decision to walk away from a career that gave me achievement, recognition, and prosperity. That wasn't enough. I never felt satisfied by that. What I realized at that time was my life needed to be about purpose and impact. And I felt that purpose every day for the last 4.5 years. But now it's time for impact. And for us to have the impact that we should have and we will have, it's going to require us to achieve the full potential of this program. For us to fulfill that potential, we're going to have to match an incredible legacy and history of support with underdog spirit and work ethic. It's who I am. It's the only way I know how to do it. It's how a kid from the sticks in North Carolina ends up as a partner in the fastest growing law firm in the country. It's how the deputy AD at Illinois becomes the head guy at Oklahoma." That quote and that story about his last 4.5 years, and then even the mention about the sticks in North Carolina, incredible. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was a really, he got his first couple themes out there, and then he got personable, and I liked it. Denny waited until the end of his speech to give his thank you messages to his family. He acknowledged as, before he went into it, now to get to the hard part. Likely because the emotional part of the comments that he knew would come up. He became emotional when thanking Illini athletics, including Josh Whitman and football head coach Brett Bielema. He then said how fortunate he was that his parents were there and how they are always in his corner. "This role demands a lot," Denny says as he begins to thank his wife and his boys. He shares to his boys that, quote, "I know you don't like to listen to your dad, but give me a minute here. I hope you're never afraid to take a risk to pursue something that matters to you. And when you do that, you're going to have moments of self-doubt. And when that happens, I hope you remember this moment. This moment is not the culmination, but it is proof of concept. Proof that at any point in your life, if you choose passion and purpose over convention, it's going to take you exactly where you need to be," end quote. Thought that was awesome. Another great story. Making eye contact with his sons there. Then Denny's speech ended with one final recognition of the historic brand of Oklahoma. Clearly, like I said, one of his themes. And of course, he signed off with a Boomer Sooner, which was delightful to the audience. What I found really interesting was the media aspect of the press conference after the formalities. So for just, like I said, settings are different. Very formal setting, university seal above him, on the stage, buttoned up crowd. But then the media press conference was just sitting, the president, the search chair, and Roger at a table just taking questions. I thought it was interesting. There was someone here that, some questions that were really helpful. His own comments, he didn't speak long in this, but another quote that I liked, quote, "Spent 15 years training for this job without knowing I was training for it." That was his opening line. He credits once again Josh Whitman for hiring him at Illinois, allowing him to find that purpose. Someone asked, why is this risk the right moment for you? And then he goes back to that quote, "The real risk was walking away from the practice of law. I did that 4.5 years ago, and doing that and living in that self-doubt in that period of time of 2 months, lived in a lot of self-doubt. I upended my family's life. We had achieved a lot of success. We were by any measurement living a good life, and my wife, God bless her, let me chase this thing. And when you upend not just your life, but other people's lives, that's a real risk. And I remember walking out on our football field. We played Nebraska. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the purpose that I had been seeking. It gave me that feeling that I was looking for every day. So once you dealt with a risk like that and you came through the other side of it, the rest of it kind of feels easy. The risk here is living up to the legacy of this place, and I can get really comfortable with that because of people like this you're working with. The risk isn't all that great when you see the team you've got around you and know you've got that group to help pull you forward through this thing. So there's some risk, but nothing like what I felt almost 5 years ago. So I feel pretty good about it right now. So I thought that was interesting. The other quote I was going to mention, someone said, you said 20 years ago that you wanted to be an athletic director, and asked whether the non-traditional path he took, if Denny ever thought back to that and could imagine it would take him there. This goes back to storytelling. If you can mix in one or two stories. Mind you, this is in the press conference media portion. His quote, in 2005, we were living in St. Louis, and I grew up in North Carolina. And North Carolina was in town for the national championship game, and my mom and I were walking into the game, and we see the athletic director at Carolina. And my mom, God bless her, told him in that moment that I was going to have his job someday. That was 20 years ago. I was still in my first year of law school. Again, God love our parents, right? But I grew up in and around college campuses, and there's just an energy unlike anything else in the world. So it's always been my goal to be in college athletics in some form. I didn't always know it would be an athletic director, but the closer I got to it, and as I matured a little bit and started to see how my skills could translate, in 2021 happened, and the world changed in our business. And again, credit to Josh for seeing that the skills I had developed to translate to what we're doing now. And it took him some convincing to convince me that that was the answer. And when he did it, you just knew instantly that once you check those boxes on actually doing the work, you get into leadership and test yourself as a leader. And I think that is what this is all about now. There was one last quote I got to mention about Rodgers because I think it was really helpful. Is someone asked him about his experience assisting with the financing at Ballpark Village in St. Louis and the Oklahoma Entertainment District project. This kind of goes to he knows what he's talking about. He's a process person. In that, we represented the bond issuers in that deal and worked closely with the issuers. If you know much about the bond market, the underwriting process of that is highly complex. The documentation is extraordinary, and ultimately what I saw in that deal is just how long that project took. And the thing I learned from that is you just have to keep plugging away at it. And every time it turns and you think the deal might be falling apart, we'll stay in the fight longer than anyone else. And that's exactly what we had to do in that deal. So that deal was one of the first projects I ever worked on, and it took almost 7 years before we got it done. And that's what I mean by staying in the fight. It's not just on the field, it's in everything we do. And big projects like that aren't easy, and a lot of them fall apart just because of the fatigue that comes with them. And the real work going into it is keeping the folks engaged so as that fatigue sits in, no one ever loses sight on all the reasons on the front end that we said we were so important. And so I think that's what we'll look to do and continue to plug away until we get that built. So my analysis on Roger Denny, when we mix in the press conference formalities and the media Q&A, he definitely had a quiet confidence, certainly looked and sounded like I was watching a lawyer talk. I don't say that negatively. I think it was a calming scene in that in Oklahoma doesn't have to come off as an energetic press conference because it is in a great position after years of excellence under Joe Castiglione. I think Denny had two key themes that were revisited throughout his prepared speech, and another one that showed up more in the comments to the media. There's only one Oklahoma, and then excellence and championships are the expectations. But in the media session, he spoke much more about being process-oriented and having a strategic plan for each program in order to reach the full potential and championships he referenced in his opening speech. So in that media portion after the speeches, almost every question was answered with in-depth evidence of a process that worked for him, which he will use at Oklahoma. He was asked about his role in strategy and stadium improvements in Illinois. Denny admitted that their approach was not flashy but necessary, with gradual improvements each year leading up to an improved stadium instead of one huge project at once. And then in a follow-up question, Denny was asked about how he will fix men's basketball and how he will evaluate all coaches and all programs. He admitted he doesn't know yet since he just started, but laid out why each program deserves its own strategy and how he sees coach evaluations. What I found, nothing was too difficult for him to answer, and nothing was too tempting for him to answer recklessly. There was no over-promising on details. There was obviously excellence in championships, but when you talk about the process and his philosophy, it was really just only the hard work and confidence he was building. Hard to find any flaws in this press conference from Roger Denny. I really like how he did this one thing, though, that I think a lot of people should consider. He waited to do his thank yous to his family in the written speech at the end, after he got through it, which is a strategy I don't think anyone else really takes. it certainly helped him get through the speech delivery and hit all of his talking points. So before I get to the next one, I want to tell you about two things that I am doing that I think everyone watching or listening to this would be helpful. If you are wanting to know in your own career what you should pivot, I've had probably 10 to 15 people in the last couple of weeks reach out to me, DM me and say, hey, what trends are you seeing? I want to be an AD. I'm a little worried about trying to get this and this so that I can be in the running for these things. If you want to have a career mapping session based on the HEA research, the AD profiles that I don't share publicly, I will eventually turn into research that is paid for. But if you want to have a 1-hour session with me to talk about in-depth, one-on-one about your career up to this point, where you're trying to go, what steps you need to do to get there, and then I will give you very critical feedback in my opinion, because I think that is the best way to learn, not just tell you you're doing great or search firms saying, oh, they just went with someone else, they thought you were great. I'll give you the floor to talk with me and see your delivery, see your thoughts, see your experiences, and just based on the information I have about ADs and what the perspective of colleges, I will give you honest feedback. And so for $75 for a 1-hour session, just reach out to me, go to my website. You can see that on the career mapping, or just reach out, travis@higheredathletics.com. And the other thing people have been asking me for that I have to still think out strategically is they love the dossiers. The dossiers are great, but if they really want to know about a place and they are very much wanting to either get a deputy job or an AD job there, they have this idea that this job might open up, I will do a custom HEA briefing. So that is political IQ. It's basically qualitative. I'm trained as a field researcher. I'm trained as an observer. So I will literally go to the place. I'm here in the middle of the country. It's very easy for me to get to a lot of places. And I will give you a video, tons of video. I will walk through campus. I'll walk through the neighborhoods or drive through the neighborhoods. And I was on a school board. I know exactly what to look for, school districts. All this stuff I will put together in a written report for you, and just reach out to me if you're very serious about this. Custom quote, obviously, depending on the depth of what you're interested in, I will be happy to help you. So just reach out, travis@higheredathletics.com. There's also a customized school briefings page on the website. Now let's get to the next one. Kevin White at Charlotte. So this press conference began with the fight song as the people rose to their feet as White and board chair walked to the stage and sat at a table. Afterwards, the chancellor was quickly introduced. The chancellor had a long list of people to thank for their attendance and then asked the White family to stand to have an extended welcome applause from the crowd, which is a nice gesture. So the chancellor started her speech with explaining, quote, Charlotte is a university that competes in the classroom in research, on the court, and field. We are an R1 institution in one of the most dynamic cities in the country. Our expectations are high, and our aspirations are even higher. Athletics matters here. It matters to our student athletes. It matters to our campus community. It matters to our alumni and supporters. It matters to me, and it matters to the Charlotte region. We're committed to competing at the highest level in the American Conference and positioning Charlotte athletics for sustained competitive excellence. With that in mind, when we set out to find our next athletic director, we were looking for 4 things. Someone who can fundraise, someone who gets revenue generation, someone who knows how to win, and someone with a proven track record of strong and visionary leadership. So the chancellor spoke for 5 minutes, then introduced the board chair, who spoke for 4 minutes and described Kevin White as a man of achievement, vision, and execution. He also mentioned that they think that they have the best athletic director in the country, and then he said, actually, the best athletic director in the world. So I thought that these were interesting. He also emphasized that White has an almost 200-page playbook for the job. The chancellor then came back to the microphone to introduce Kevin White and take photos with personalized CLT football and basketball uniforms. Let me ask you, what do Clemson, Charlotte, Coastal Carolina, and Boise State have in common? These athletic departments decided to use data with context, turning that data into action in hiring coaches, writing contracts, and doing long-term planning. They did this by partnering with AD Vantage. After 10 plus years as a D1 college coach, founder and CEO Tanner Stump saw a gap. Athletic administrators didn't have the tools to find not just the best coach, but the right coach for their program at their institution at that time. Most industry solutions he did see were expensive, outdated, or lacked sport-specific insights. So he decided to build AD Vantage from the ground up, bootstrapped, customer first, and focused on the future of college athletics. Before we joined forces, Tanner let me get my own username and look under the hood as an AD looking to hire some coaches. And I can truly say this is a company and product that athletic directors and sport administrators need. Visit athleticdirectorvantage.com to get a demo. Tell them Travis from Higher Ed Athletics sent you, and ask them about the rating score they created called Coach Effect. So White comes to the stage, very much confident speaker. I thought that he did an incredible job, but he started out thanking the chancellor, among many others, started the speech by emphasizing the importance of the athletic department being a partner to the entire campus. He then thanked previous ADs and presidents that invested in him. White then shared his faith in God and how he has worked in their family. Afterwards, White gave an emotional appreciation message to his wife and children and his mother, extended family, and mentioned his late father too. White also showed his appreciation to his fraternity brothers and childhood friends that made the trip to support him at the press conference. Quote, "At my core, the reason I do this comes down to purpose. Back in 2008, I was working in corporate America and found myself asking an important question. What kind of impact am I really having? Am I making a difference where it truly mattered? Around that same time, I watched something special happen year after year. My wife is an educator, and I watch lines of parents wait after kindergarten graduations just to say thank you to her for helping to turn the light bulb on for their child, helping them discover a love for reading and learning. And I remember thinking, I want that purpose. I want to make our society better. I found that purpose in college athletics. Do I love to win? Absolutely. And I understand winning will always be a part of how this job is judged. But equally important, maybe even more important, is impacting the lives of young people who walk onto this beautiful campus. I want to help them grow, help them develop confidence, help them to become good citizens for life after college, and most importantly, graduating with a degree from this great university. That's my why." End quote. He went on with another really good quote that I liked, and it shows his institutional research that he had done. Quote, "Charlotte Athletics has extraordinary opportunity in front of it. The university is growing, the city is thriving, and I want everybody to hear this clearly. Charlotte's stock is rising. But in order to truly strike gold, it's going to take all of us. We have more than 189,000 alumni around the country, around the world, and our responsibility is to make sure they're proud of their university. But greatness requires participation. We need you in the stands. We need you buying tickets. We need you supporting our student athletes. We need you investing, donating, and believing in what we're building together. Because when this university and the city align behind Charlotte Athletics, special things will happen." And so Charlotte stock is rising is a theme that he had mentioned in the speech there, but it's also on social media. That's his motto, is the stock is rising. So I thought that was interesting. Another quote when mentioning to coaches and staff, quote, "Excellence cannot just live on the scoreboard. Elite must be the standard in everything we do. How we recruit, how we serve our student athletes, how we engage our fans and donors, how we represent this university every single day. Our coaches have scoreboards that measure wins and losses, but everyone in our department, starting with me, will be accountable to a higher standard. And when I commit fully. In the days ahead, I plan to listen, learn, and build strong partnerships across campus and throughout the Charlotte community. Because success here comes from alignment. Trustees, campus leadership, coaches, staff, alumni, donors, fans, and student body rowing in the same direction. Charlotte is an incredible university with visionary leadership. We have passionate supporters, outstanding coaches and staff, and together we have an opportunity to build something truly special. My promise to you is simple. We will lead with integrity. We will compete relentlessly. We will develop young people prepared to lead meaningful lives. And we will represent Charlotte in a way that makes every one of our alumni proud to wear green and gold. My family and I are grateful to be here. The work starts today. The future is bright. And together, let's go strike gold. Thank you. Go Niners." That's how he ended his quote. So those that aren't sure, the CLT is their obviously airport code, but also striking gold is a reference to the CLT or the Charlotte pick as the 49ers. So I think he came in with a couple of good key like kind of things, taglines there. But it was straight to the point, I think, is what I took from this. He spoke to everyone in the crowd. I thought it was interesting. Kevin White spoke for approximately 9 minutes before taking questions while seated next to the chancellor. Asked about his strategy for fundraising, said, "It is important, but it's also important to focus on revenue generation." White cited the importance of working with the 189,000 alumni and the 60% of them that live within Charlotte. He mentioned fundraising starts with the Associate Vice Chancellor for Development, Penny Hawkins, which came with smiles and applause from the crowd as she clearly is a beloved person at Charlotte. Then asked about what can and cannot be applied from Clemson to Charlotte. This is what I thought was really interesting that people might want to take from this. Quote, "I'm coming from Clemson, but I'm Charlotte now. I won't reference Clemson very much after today, but I'll tell you the thing that really made Clemson great is we didn't rest on our laurels. Despite going to CFP games and Elite Eight basketball runs, Clemson was never satisfied. So there's a lot to be taken from that. Here at Charlotte, we can never be satisfied. We're going to be great members of the American Conference. We're going to compete at the highest level, but we're never going to be satisfied." He asked about what advice he received from Clemson Athletic Director Graham Neff and then ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips. ACC is in Charlotte. He said that Jim Phillips means so much to my family. He's always available to me when I need him or a call, industry specific or personal. The advice he gave me was that Charlotte's a great job, a great city on the rise, and they have an opportunity to do great things in a great conference that is well respected and representation in the CFP, so that you can have it all here. Great leadership, alignment from the board to the chancellor and to the rest of the athletic department. Talking about Graham, the last 4 years have been really great for me in my professional career. Graham is a younger guy. He's younger than me, but he's gotten some gray hairs over the last 4 years, which brought laughs. He continued, "But I learned so much from him. The way that he thinks differently. He's innovative. He's been there for both national championships at Clemson. You can attribute a lot of success at Clemson to Graham and Dan Radovich. And so for me, it taught me a different way of looking at things." Graham, speaking about Charlotte, wanted to make sure the board was aligned because we really do have the opportunity to be the front porch here. And so I'm looking forward to doing that here at Charlotte. Asked about other things like the construction of the football stadium currently going on at Charlotte. He admitted, they asked what he thought about it. He said, "I probably need a little more time to dig in on it, but we have great people here with great plans in place. We're expanding the stadium, as you alluded to. It's going to fit us really well. I'm looking forward to getting in there with the staff and see ways we can enhance that from the fan and student perspective. But just really looking forward to getting here, getting started, rolling up my sleeves, and understanding how we can potentially make it better." One or two other things from Kevin. Someone asked, "When did you become interested in the position?" And he said, quote, "Well, early on, my ties to North Carolina. Obviously, when Charlotte came open, I was all ears and eager to learn more. I know the process takes time, but instantly I was really intrigued by it and interested in it because of the city of Charlotte. It really fit a lot of the places I had been, and I felt a lot of things I could translate here, and also because the institution is on the rise. When I was in school in the 90s, it was largely considered commuter school. The chancellor and leadership of the board have changed that narrative. And going to the American is a really competitive conference, so a lot of those things attracted me to the job, along with the continued investments in being an R1 institution, which happened about a year ago now, which opens up other doors for us from an athletics perspective, but also a university perspective." Really, another really good, strong quote. And this kind of goes to nothing Kevin did, but this goes to what you just need to be aware of if you have a president or a board chair or a search chair. You can't really control what they say, and I just feel like sometimes they'll go off script a little bit. But the chancellor was asked about what stood out about Kevin White, and she said, quote, "The community connections. I don't think every candidate comes with 30 people texting, emailing, calling. It was fantastic to know that he had a broad sort of range of people here already rooting for him in Charlotte. As Trustee Wilson mentioned, they're people we know, people in our community, and people who haven't necessarily given to our university. We're going to say this is important. You want to support our AD. You want to support our athletic programs. we want you to do that. That was an example of one, because that isn't something we said was a criteria that we must have. It certainly was a nice have, end quote. I just thought that that probably opens the window a little bit too much into behind the scenes of his candidacy. I thought it was just kind of awkward, but nothing like damage not done, I guess. But it's just kind of interesting to speak that loosely about it. So my Kevin White analysis. I think Kevin spoke with incredible confidence from his script. The speech was in a brown leather-bound notebook, and I think it was organized in a way that he could keep the pace he wanted. I think he did a great job introducing his Charlotte stock is rising motto that he already had been using on social media. Being clear in his comment that he won't mention Clemson very much after today, that it's time to look ahead at Charlotte, was a line that I think others should borrow and incorporate, especially if you go from that P4 deputy job to another AD position that isn't at a power school. I think it just kind of shifts your focus immediately to that school. Everyone knows your experience there, but you don't need to flaunt it in your comments. Instead, what Kevin did was respectful to the question asked, complimentary of the time at Clemson, but he tied it back to where his feet were now. But White himself did a good job of just really just answering every question, and I thought it was a great job. Now let's go to Ryan Berryman at New Mexico, which I thought it was obvious that he was going to get this job. They didn't slow down when he was the interim. This one was kind of a fun start. So the location appeared to be a stage set up in the weight room. Band members playing the fight song from above the stage while Berryman and his wife walked down the stairs to their seats. The introduction started with Associate AD of Communications introducing the president, who spoke for 4 minutes. The president recounted Berryman's lifetime ties to Albuquerque and UNM. She mentioned that Berryman's interim experience was vital as they did not lose momentum, and he led UNM to receive state funding for improvements to the stadium and finalize a naming rights partnership for the basketball arena. Quote, he's someone that knows the business of college athletics, who understands what it takes to build and sustain a culture of excellence, and someone who really loves cheering for the Lobos no matter what the sport. He's one of our own, and we couldn't be prouder or in better hands, end quote. Also really cool, Berryman was presented both a red Lobos suit jacket that the president placed on him, as well as a football jersey with his name on it that we typically see. He started his speech by saying that this was his dream job, and then thanking the president, board, search committee, and his athletic department staff and coaches. He then thanked donors, fans, alums, and the community for their support of the Lobos before saying words about his family. After a brief pause and deep breath to collect himself, Berryman moved on from the introductory thank you messages. That took him a little bit, about under 2 minutes, and then got into the next part of his speech. Quote, leading this athletic department is more than just a job for me. It is a combination of passion, preparation, and a deeply rooted care for this place, its people, and its history. The Lobos are more than an athletic department. They are a beacon of pride and promise of hope for our communities and for generations of people from every corner of our state. I know how much this athletic department means to our university, our city, and our state, and that's what fuels me each and every day, end quote. I thought that was a great quote to start with. I mean, he walked into a room of people that already loved him, but he really just took them by like that. That is his kind of opening quote, I think was really good. He mentioned that the university leadership is aligned and that the state government and elected officials have championed key priorities for the Lobos athletic department. I have not seen in the press conferences I've watched where someone thanks the state legislature. They had, yes, just recently received funding for their football stadium, but that's something that if you're taking notes or you're taking mental notes, thank your state legislature, or at least recognize them. See if any of them are in attendance too. And then he kind of goes into another quote. Quote, while I have been tasked with leading this athletic department into the next 5 years, make no mistake, this is not my athletic department. It is our athletic department, and it is at the University for New Mexico. In the final part of his speech, quote, I will never shy away from a good idea. I will always be approachable, and where others have shied away from change, we will embrace it. Instead of seeing threats, we will find opportunities. And there's no doubt in my mind that we collectively can be the best resource athletic department financially and in fan support and pursue championships in every single sport. And what will never change is the passion in this room, the support from the community, and the pride we all feel as New Mexicans as the Lobos take the field or take the court. I'm incredibly grateful to get back to work. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and go Lobos, end quote. So he spoke for about 5 minutes before accepting questions from the media in attendance. So he took these questions as standing on the podium immediately after he got done talking. So he's still standing at the podium in that setting, so just keep that in mind. The first question was interesting as it kind of shaped him as being known as the nice guy at Lobos Athletics for several years, but now he, quote, gets to be the bad guy and be the boss now, quote, which seemed kind of like a weird way to phrase it. Berryman addressed that by saying he's experienced a growth in his responsibility in telling people no as an administrator at each role he's had at UNM, and that while he still likes being the nice guy, he knows what the role requires. And he said it with this just like calm demeanor, but like, you know, he understood it. And it was a respectful response to a somewhat interesting question. The same person then follows up and asks about not having lead fundraising roles in his career, and basically almost making it sound like that's a disqualifier for college athletics right now. Now, you watching this knows that it's more than just fundraising now. So Berryman cited his excellent team. I thought it was interesting. He singled out Jalen Dominguez in fundraising record years. Jalen was someone that reportedly also interviewed for the position, and then talks about the continued growth of their operating budget and the importance of finding new revenue streams, and mentioned once again state support in addition to continued fundraising being vital. So another calm take in the question that's questioning your leadership. It didn't seem like it was about age, but he is, I think, 32 years old. Yes, he's been at New Mexico forever, and it's true he hasn't been in fundraising. But to ask that question showed to me that the person asking didn't really understand the changing, evolving role of the athletic director. Ryan clearly does. He clearly communicated that well, in my opinion. Once again, not overly communicating. It was a short, and I like the praise he gave Jalen Dominguez and his team. I thought that was a great leadership move. Another reporter asked about how he plans to keep UNM athletes from leaving besides just asking for donors to give more money. Berryman acknowledged that not every athlete will have the same deep roots for UNM as he does, but emphasized that the department has numbers that many power schools wish they had. Another really quick to the point, didn't have to answer it too strategically, but it's like, hey, we have it pretty good here, and that UNM is special. Talked about the long-term future of the department. If we just focus on what we do in our own walls, the story will tell itself, and I think we've seen that this year. People are going to take notice of the wins. Asked about what would you do differently than Fernando Lovo. Another really quote that, and these are, based on how he responded, I don't think any of these were like expected unless he thought about what he was going to get from maybe knowing the media people. But this question he probably assumed would come. I'd probably flip that around. There's more that I'd like to do like him. I think he is an incredible leader. He empowered me for this moment. He treated me like a future athletic director and brought me into every conversation and prepared me for this moment. The only knock I have on him, which I've told him, he's late to meetings often, and I'm sure he's gotten better. I'm teasing him. There's more I'd like to do similar to him than different than him, end quote. Talked about right-of-way priorities, retention of basketball players and coaches, ramping up for the football, and getting state funding for the stadium was important. Asked about his philosophy towards NIL, and he said, it will take all of us. We will not be bankrolled by one company here. Here's another quote that just quickly grabs and makes sense. He goes, we have to be the Green Bay Packers of college athletics, and I really believe in our ability to do that. That one actually got applause. Mind you, New Mexico is nowhere near the Green Bay, Wisconsin, but everybody understood what they meant. So Green Bay owned by, the fans. I thought that was just incredibly, if that was off the cuff, that was really good. Then asked about the ability to retain men's basketball coach and if any decisions had been made on the women's basketball coach. So it's important that they did make a separation with women's basketball, and the time I'm recording this is the same day I think they hired a new one. But in this moment, he mentioned how he was in the room helping hire their men's coach initially, and how he and Fernando didn't want to be the idiots to not hire him. So he knows it's important to evaluate and keep having conversations. And then also said, but that it was premature since the team was still competing in the NIT. At the time of recording, they're in the NIT's semifinals. Berryman did not give any indication in the press conference about women's basketball other than that the evaluation is part of the process after a season, as it is with every other sport, and that he would definitely evaluate things. They have since moved on from that coach, but like I said, it wasn't obvious in his statements. And I think that was just, if you enter an AD job and you have a high-profile coaching decision to make, I thought he just did a great job answering that question. So the last thing I'll mention, it says, the new landscape from strictly NIL to revenue share and NIL. Talk about the complexity and how UNM moves forward. His quote here that I'll end with, it's our job to simplify that complication. Any donor that wants to keep our team here, retention is always going to be more cost effective than recruiting. That's now a tax-deductible gift through the Lobo Club. How we can simplify that message and encourage everyone that they have ownership in that process as we try to keep elite talent in New Mexico. That's our job as administrators, to simplify that and chase the money. What a great quote to end on, talking about the future. I just think it was incredible. So my analysis on Ryan Berryman's performance, he walked into a room where it seemed like almost everyone there was rooting for him. At times, it did look like his speech was somewhat out of order. So it was kind of like picking up papers out of a folder, moving it around. That is the only thing that I would say, and that's just more from it wasn't like a lack of confidence. I think it's just the order, that maybe things were out of order, getting caught up in the moment. Outside of that, he was confident and honest about how much this job means to him, how much UNM has shaped him as a person. I thought it was nice how he entered in a gray jacket coming down the stairs, but then they had a cherry red jacket placed on him from the president. It was kind of like the Masters green jacket ceremony, but it also appeared in a Q&A that this might be a tradition at UNM with coaches. So I also like how neither the president, reporters, or Berryman ever mentioned his young age. Instead, the president focused in on his deep roots at UNM, highlighting his 3 degrees and time as a student regent. Berryman answered the Q&A portion of the press conference with great confidence, brief but pointed answers, including those 2 difficult questions from the beginning that I talked about. And I think he stayed on theme with what he wanted to share, which was love for the place, importance of community participation at each level, and then continuing to build on the foundation of success in this new era of college athletics. So thanks for sticking with me to the end. I want to end it on some final thoughts. This is just a bulleted list, okay? Keep in mind, I watch all these. I've been watching all of them. Every time there's an AD press conference in the last couple of years, you can bet that I've watched them and I study them. But these 4, I obviously took my notes and put them in a post and then a video. So this is just a list, okay? And also my job as executive assistant to a Big Ten president, I helped with the speechwriter get the speeches formatted the way she liked them for the setting. Different settings, speeches matter. In this introductory press conference, that's kind of my viewpoint here. So formatting your speech is important. When I worked as the assistant, I was responsible to work with that speechwriter. And one thing that we certainly always did, I had to since do a big speech through a church setting, that I took this exact format and it made me so much more focused and calm. And so we had always printed double space with large margins, printed one-sided only. That way you're not kind of like flipping and then looking and changing. You're just pointed right here in front of you at the podium. So we did that, and in a 3-ring binder that made sense. So we didn't necessarily do like a leather bound every time because there were so many changes and so many speeches that we didn't do that. But I really like that Kevin White had his in a very leather bound, and then he also had it, that same book, when he did the men's basketball press conference just a few days later, it felt like. Bryan Blair's was in what looked like a, like just a regular folder, and then he had that out. So it's just interesting how different people do it. But put it with a 3-ring binder or a portfolio that makes sense for the amount of papers you're going to have. And then consider adding numbers to the lines of your speech. So if you need to stop somewhere or make a point of emphasis, you can either tap or circle that number. This is a setting in Word that you can easily add. But I mean, if you get caught off guard or there's an applause or you're looking up a lot, if you're following along with your finger, you don't have to cover the text, but you can add little notes in the margins around the number. It's just really helpful. And then also, If there are names that are difficult to pronounce correctly or you're uncertain, ask obviously ahead of time, but I would write it out, phonetic spelling of the word or name to make sure you pronounce it correctly. And that's just incredibly important, I think. You can obviously ask someone, even ask them to write out the phonetic spelling, and then you just put that into your speech. Don't be afraid to ask that type of question. It's better than messing up someone's name or not mentioning a name that you otherwise would have. If you practice a speech, prepare for multiple setups. That's including the president or chancellor either being in the front row of the crowd, sitting next to you at a table while you give your speech. Practice giving the speech in the same room or at a similar podium while practicing, looking up at the audience. Know that if the mic is in front of you and you look over to the side, if they're next to you, the president or chancellor, the mic might not catch everything you say clearly if you don't practice. So if this is a microphone, for example, and they're over here, maybe you lean a little bit to talk, or you're just at an angle. Okay, so just little things like that. Is anyone going to care? No, but if you want this to just come off as best possible, knowing it's your kind of first one, I really think you need to take it seriously, and that you want to be able to make sure that everything is heard and done the best way you can. Study the names and the positions of everyone on the search committee. Know the trustees that were involved in the process and each of the ones that are actually in attendance. What I would do, ask the communications administrator, either the president's office or the athletic department's office, who important is in attendance. Ask them to write it on a piece of paper legibly. Don't worry about it being written on your speech. Just have it nearby, clearly labeled as something like, quote, VIP in attendance. If possible, try to understand where some of these people are sitting, and you could make notes of that on the sheet of paper with arrows. Imagine the paper as the same setup as the room. So it could be, just whatever. And in your written speech, you can make a note on there in red ink or something, say, thank VIP in attendance. You'll know not to say that word, but you'll then reference the updated sheet that you could have. Understand if there will be a Q&A afterwards or if it will be afterwards in an interview style informally. This likely means you'll be answering questions in different settings and with different spaces or length of answers required. We saw Bryan Blair not take questions in the press conference. He went more of like the kind of the car wash where it seemed like a lot of people around him and he was doing different media. We saw Ryan Berryman and Kevin White answer questions from the stage, but Kevin was sitting. Ryan stayed standing up. We saw Roger Denny do the formal part of it. Then they broke up, and then they did the seated thing. So just everybody seemed to have a different approach. So know the setting. Don't be afraid to ask these things. Don't just go along. Get detailed. I think if anything, that shows confidence that they made the right hire. If you are that detailed that you want to know every part of run of show. Let's see. Try to stick with 2 to 3 themes or points of emphasis. Prepare for the questions you might get. We talked about Berryman's Q&A session. Seemed like they could have thrown some people off, as the first 2 questions basically pointed out why they didn't think he would be prepared for this type of job. Instead, he nailed the responses and looked confident in doing so. I think preparing for what perceived shortcomings are in your resume, or if local media outlets maybe had others higher on their own list of candidates, that can go a long way in staying focused and on theme. Blair and White had to be ready to be asked about hiring men's basketball coaches. Denny was asked several questions about capital projects underway, to how to get men's basketball and football back to prominence. Just, you're all smart. Obviously, you know what's going on from studying the institution and the industry. Just be prepared. They don't have to go in your speech, especially if you know you're going to get asked them in the Q&A. Understand that whoever is leading the search, whether the president or chancellor, board chair, or search chair, may make some exaggerative comments about you or the school. The Charlotte chancellor, in my opinion, talked too loosely and much about Kevin White's many contacts in the Charlotte area that kept contacting them during the search on his behalf and indicating that they would like to support Charlotte if Kevin White's the next athletic director. That just, I don't think, looked great for Kevin, and it was unnecessary, I think. I would just recommend ADs be ready for whatever comments their new bosses might make at the podium, to not let it catch you off guard or to lose focus, and be ready to be sitting a while, as Oklahoma Roger Denny had to wait 35 minutes before he actually stepped to the podium in possibly the most nervous except besides maybe marrying your spouse or when your kids are being born, is probably one of the biggest moments is you have to wait 35 minutes sitting to wait at the podium. So if you think you might, and this is my final thing that I think was just, I watched Roger Denny's last, and so I thought that this was really stood out as something people should do. If you think that you might become overly emotional in thanking your list of family and mentors, which is totally understandable and to be expected, consider making it the end of your speech like Roger Denny did. I never have seen that before, but it allowed him to effectively deliver his prepared speech while still showing his personal side to the audience at the end. I think it might help people with their full delivery of their theme and talking points. So if you found this type of information helpful, I know it was a long video, you can obviously go read the written article on higheredathletics.com, go to the AD Insights section, and if you want help with custom briefings or a career mapping session, go to higheredathletics.com, reach out to me individually, whatever you want to do there. And then once again, if you want to help fund the HEA road trip in the month of May, you can click the link that will take you to a Stripe account to donate $5, $10, $20, whatever you want there. So thanks for watching and listening to Higher Ed Athletics.